So after examining the offseason options for the Giants at edge rusher or even defensive end, depending on 3-4 or 4-3, I've come to a realization that there might not be a great answer here, and it might not be solved this offseason. And if it is solved this offseason, the Giants might regret it. So let me get into it. So the Giants have O'Shane Ximines and Lorenzo Carter under contract for 2020 and beyond. Those guys on rookie contracts, obviously, but outside of them, there's really not much going on for pass rushers that's on the Giants roster right now. Marcus Golden, who did sign a one-year deal here, had a nice year last year, did have the 10 sacks, had a lot of pressures, and did a lot in the run game as well, so he was good all around, but not the type of player that I want to give a contract to. We'll see if the Giants have a different opinion about that, because he has stated he wants to come back here, but everyone has a price and everyone wants money, so if the Giants give him enough money, he'll probably be back. But if another team offers more, he might go elsewhere because he is a free agent. There's no franchise tag here and stuff like that. He's really free to go wherever he wants or whatever team wants him. So here it is, the sad truth about the pass rushers this offseason. You'll almost have to overpay for one. We know that based off free agency. I mean, in free agency, you're always paying for, I guess, B minus, C plus level players, but you're giving them like B plus, A minus, sometimes A level money. So that's really the bad part about free agency. They most likely won't return good value. I mean, there was a reason last year I loved the Shaquille Barrett contract when it happened. It was like a 1 year, $5 million deal. I said, hey, this is a guy in Denver who did not play all downs, and when he was actually playing, it was really good. So why not try to give a guy like that, a 1 year deal and see what he's made of? And the guy had like 20 sacks last year. So of course now he'll cost a lot more, probably franchise tagged, but still, there's not going to be a guy in this free agency class that's probably going to like stand out and give you a 20 sack season or even anything close to that like Shaq Barrett did last year. And none of these guys can really single-handedly change your defense. I mean, you can argue Jadeveon Clowney, but based off his track record and what Clowney does, he's not a consistent player. We know that. He does have times where he looks tremendous and looks like one of the best edge rushers in football, but then there's times where, I don't want to say he takes plays off, but then there's just times where he's not doing anything, and I can't really explain why, because making his highlight film the other day, I watched a lot of his 2019 season, and as I said, he looks really tremendous sometimes, but then he's not too consistent, so that's definitely not good. And the only surefire pass rusher by consensus that's going to be really good in this draft is Chase Young, but I still believe the Redskins will take him second overall. I could be wrong. They might go to Tagovailoa. It might, surprise all of us, but I still have them going Chase Young. I don't see them passing on him. Maybe they go with Dwayne Haskins for one more year. So chances are the Giants won't get a really good pass rusher out of the draft. Now, of course, there's people in the draft that are sleeper picks and whatnot, guys with a lot of high upside. We'll talk about them later, but first I wanted to get to NFL free agency. So I listed some guys below that are slated to be free agents, and I didn't include some players. I took Shaq Barrett off the list, I took Matthew Judon off the list, and Yannick Ngakoue because I expect them to be franchise tagged. We already know Ngakoue is tagged, and I don't think the other two were announced yet, but I do expect it to happen. Whenever the deadline is, it's coming up soon, so I do expect them not to be available in free agency. So, Jadeveon Clowney, I touched on briefly. He is seeking $22 million per season. That was a report. I'm not sure how legit it is, but if it is, I would not touch that, honestly. 27 years old. He's inconsistent. He does help a lot in the run game, but we have other players for that, whether it's Dexter Lawrence, Dalvin Tomlinson, or even if we bring back Leonard Williams, who the Giants apparently are not close to a contract with, so that's kind of interesting, but we'll see how that plays out. He probably will end up getting franchise tagged at the worst, so we'll see. He has injury concerns, had 5 surgeries since 2014. Nothing major. I don't want to mislead you guys, and nothing crazy, I don't think, in terms of surgeries for Clowney, but still, it's not what you want to hear, obviously, for a guy you might give over $20 million to per season. He's probably not, he's probably the best option out there right now, if I'm being honest. I mean, if you take away Chase Young, and, I'd probably argue Ngakoue over Clowney. I know that might be crazy, but I just like him more because of the durability and the way he can get to the passer consistently as compared to what Clowney does. And Clowney does get his pressures. I know we shouldn't go by sacks, and people look at Clowney's 3.5 sacks or whatever it was from last year and just assume he can't get to the quarterback, but that's not the truth. I mean, when you watch him play, it does get there a lot, but of course, sometimes things happen. I mean, pressures are pressures, and if you're making a quarterback uncomfortable, you're pretty much doing your job there. So his PFF grade was 87.3 last year, which is really good. It's kind of elite, so you like seeing that if you're a PFF believer, but I'm just not really down with the idea of giving Clowney $22 million. That seems like a bit too much for me. Now on to Dante Fowler, who's 25 years old. He did have 11.5 sacks last year, which does look good on paper. But when you look at his game log, it's actually very interesting. He did all of his damage in the first half of the season, and then did nothing for 6 straight weeks, and then had 2 sacks the final game of the year against the Panthers team that just quite frankly quit last year. So he did, he was the 3rd overall pick in the 2015 draft. We know he's talented. He had 2 seasons of only 4 sacks in his career so far. He was traded on his rookie deal, so that's not something you want to see. He had his best season, I believe, in 2017, which is when the Jaguars defense was ridiculous. The whole Saxonville thing happened, and guys like Ngakoue and Calais Campbell were having great seasons, and it was easy to get to the quarterback because there just wasn't enough offensive linemen and blockers to contain all these good pass rushers, so it made everyone's job easier in that defense. And when I watched Dante Fowler play, he plays very out of control. I don't know if he has discipline issues like Clowney does with getting too many penalties, but when I watched him play, there was a lot of times he would just overshoot the quarterback, and he would get there but wouldn't finish the job, and it would make the quarterback it would throw the quarterback off, but sometimes they would just duck under his tackle and he wouldn't get the sack. So there are times where Dante Fowler gets in the backfield but doesn't clean up or finish the job, and that kind of is annoying, but he does get there a lot. He is a pass rusher. He's, I guess, decent at stopping the run, but not like Jadeveon Clowney level. His PFF grade was 72.1 last year, which is not too bad. I think all these guys are in the 70s except for Clowney, who was 87. So Fowler's not the great all-around player that Clowney is, but he's still a pretty decent option. It just depends how much you pay him. I feel like a guy like Fowler, who signed a 1-year prove-it deal last year, will definitely seek a lot of money. He probably might chase the most money. He might not care about location too much, and playing next to Aaron Donald, even the Ndamukong Suh the previous year, definitely helps, so you have to keep that in mind as well. And the last guy I'll touch on here is Bud Dupree, a guy from the Steelers who might be franchise tagged, so I have to include that as well. He's 27 years old, but he wasn't really an elite player until his contract year, which definitely scares me. So another thing is, I talked about the Jaguars' defensive line being crazy good. Playing next to TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward and Stephon Tuitt, it definitely helps. I'm not gonna say Bud Dupree is bad, but it definitely helps to play next to guys like that. And quite frankly, the Giants don't have players to a TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, Stephon Tuitt type level, unfortunately, right now. So the secondary in Pittsburgh got much better when Minkah Fitzpatrick was traded. We know that. They had Steven Nelson, who they got from the Chiefs in free agency. He was phenomenal last year. So the Steelers' defense all around was just good, and it made Bud Dupree's job a lot better. So he did have 11.5 sacks last year, but had no more than 6 in any previous year. I think he played 4 seasons before that. So he did have 48 pressures last year, which is not bad. I don't know if that's more than Marcus Golden. He's around there, I feel like, but it wasn't. I think Marcus Golden might have had more, but never had more than 40 pressures before that. So I personally would have a tough time giving Bud Dupree a big contract, and I'm sure the Steelers are very much on the fence about giving him a franchise tag because you're not sure if this guy's legit or not. He had, 4 decent years in the NFL before that, played at an elite level this year, but then you're like, well, is he going to produce in the future or not? It's a very tough thing to think about, but he's still 27 years old, so maybe. I'm really not sure what Pittsburgh's going to do, but he could be a guy that's out there, and PFF gave him a 77.7 grade in 2019. So when looking at the other free agents, I personally think the best options right now for pass rushers would either be Everson Griffin on a 1 or 2 year deal. I understand Griffin's 32 years old now, I believe, and probably has his best days behind him, but he's still an effective player. I mean, when you watch him play, I know he plays on a good defensive line as well, but still, I mean, if he came here and just got enough pressures and did what he did for Minnesota for the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it was, it would be a fine pickup. I'm not trying to give this guy too much money and whatnot, but if it's a 1 or 2 year deal and we're talking $6, $7, $8 million per year, then I can live with it. I think he'd be a good option. He'd be like a stopgap type of guy. I mean, I don't think this is the draft class where the Giants are going to find a great outside linebacker for the future or defensive end, but I could be wrong, so we'll see. But I think Everson Griffin on a pretty reasonable contract would be a nice move. If he leaves Minnesota, I don't think he will, but you never know. So another one's Kyle Van Noy. We've talked about him on the podcast before and stuff like that. Played a lot of outside linebacker or defensive end last year. Had a pretty decent season. I forget how many sacks he had. It was 6.5-ish or something like that. But when watching his highlights, he looked good. I mean, he's the type of guy who I would definitely be fond of having. And, in that Pat McAfee interview, he was talking about the Giants and how much money they have, so I don't think he'd come that cheap. He wouldn't be Jadeveon Clowney type money level, but he'd still ask for a lot, I'm assuming. So we'll see how much Kyle Van Noy would cost. I believe he's 29 years old, if I remember correctly, so he's not the youngest, but he's not as old as Everson Griffin yet. So some other guys in the draft I wanted to touch on real quick. So, I mean, I'll make a separate video for this in the future about potential second-round picks for the Giants. I've had Trayvon Diggs a lot in the second round for the Giants. I like that. I mean, some of you didn't want a cornerback for some reason, but I actually tweeted this the other day. I don't understand how people are so sold on the idea that Sam Beal and DeAndre Baker are going to be good next year. Sometimes you have to prepare for the worst. You can't just assume that these guys are going to be good. I mean, this is basically their second years in the NFL, and it wasn't like they were all that good last year, so you can't, I mean, they should get better based off their age and their potential, but you never know. So, I mean, I kind of want to add another corner. I mean, sorry, but it's just the truth for me. So, Julian Okwara is a guy in the second round from Notre Dame that they could take a look at, and Terrell Lewis from Alabama, and Caleb Chason. I don't know if he's going to fall to the second round. I definitely could be wrong about that. He might be like a mid-first round pick when the draft comes. I really have no idea how teams feel about this guy, but I could see a GM falling in love with him, so we'll see. But, those three guys right there are all interesting because they have, they're physically gifted and have all the tools, but their production in college wasn't that great. But then you watch them in particular games and you're just like, wow, this guy can actually be a legitimate, really good player in the NFL one day, but then you watch them over a full season and you don't get that game to game. And then Terrell Lewis had a lot of injury concerns. I know Julian Okwara missed some games. I don't know about Caleb Chason, but he has some issues of his own, so I really don't know. I'll dive into those guys more. I'll make a separate video about it if you guys are interested about what the Giants should do at pick number 36. You guys know I want an offensive lineman, an offensive tackle at pick number 4. I mean, I have it right now, Andrew Thomas, then Jedrick Wills, then Tristan Wirfs. Anybody else, I'd rather just trade down. But if the Giants take those 3 guys at number 4, I would sit here pretty satisfied with it. So, those guys in college I talked about, they could be bad options, but I feel like one out of those 3 guys is at least going to have a decent NFL career. I don't know which one it is, and I'll have to look into that more, but we'll see. So I'll do a separate video, as I said before, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't too enthusiastic about looking at the pass rushers available. Of course, I knew about Clowney and Ngakoue and stuff like that. Even Chris Jones, who does play more interior defensive line, was franchise tagged as well. So there's a lot of good options that are off the table, unfortunately. And yeah, so let me know who you want as a pass rushing option next year. Do you want to pay Marcus Golden? Do you want to pay Jadeveon Clowney $22 million? Do you want Kyle Van Noy for, $10 to $12 million next year? Do you want Everson Griffin on a $6 to $8 million year type deal or something like that? So let me know what you guys want, and we'll talk about it in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.